Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash, the latest episode of iZombie, as well as the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include the time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of The Flash, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of iZombie and or Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Flash. So obviously last week's episode we got a big reveal that, Savitar is actually future Barry. But not quite, because they kind of went to explaining it. Because it's like, okay, so if you're future Barry, so this must be a Barry from a distant part of the future. But it's like, obviously he looks like 2024 Barry. So it's like, it can't be that far in the future. Well, apparently he's actually not technically the real Barry. He's like a time remnant, which obviously I think a lot of people, I still don't have a good grasp on it. I'm not going to pretend like I do. Like, to me, I guess it's like another version of you that's like, I don't know what it is. It's basically almost like an after image that you pull out of time. You create it by like going back in time and pulling yourself from a past point in time or something. I don't really understand it. Like, I guess it's a situation where it's like, it's complicated. It's very, very complicated. The last time we seen this whole situation pop up was when he fought Zoom and one of his remnants die. And that's kind of the point that this Barry, Savitar brings up, is the reason why I'm like the reason I came to be is because you in the future, those time remnants he used, because the future Barry mentioned the fact is he used time remnants against him. But when it was all said and done, like, one of the time remnants was left alive, but that time remnant was shunned by everybody, family and friends, even Barry himself, because it's like, yeah, you're alive and everything, but you still exist. You're here to just, you were supposed to fight and possibly, but it's like he's stuck in this place and it's like, he's just nobody, because he's not the real Barry Allen, he's not the real Flash, and so basically it kind of makes him, I don't know, like, it attacks him on a mental level, because the fact of the matter is, for him, he's still Barry, and he still lost Iris, but he has to go through that alone because no one else is there to help him and everything, and it's just like, it kind of creates like a whole complex in your head, like, I'm not even the real Barry Allen, and what am I? It's like, screw that, I'm gonna become a god. I won't have to worry about these feelings and stuff like that. I won't have to worry about being weak or feeling this way, being shunned by others. I'll make others see me by becoming God, hence him becoming Savitar. Basically, the way Cisco brings it up is like it's an endless cycle. It's like the chicken, which came first, the chicken or the egg type of scenario. It's like an endless loop of one thing. Savitar killing all the other remnants except for one ends up later on creating Savitar who goes back in time. It's just an endless cycle. And it seems like more so than anything, it's like he wants to kill Iris. Like, it's like, okay, he's Barry, but why would he want to kill Iris? I assume obviously it's part of like creating himself, but also because I think it's to spite himself, because it's like, you made, like, holding resentment against this Barry, because it's like, you're the one that created me. Obviously, you didn't create me now, you create me in the future. I know it gets super confusing when you bring it up, like when I'm bringing it up like that, but he holds resentment against him. It's like, no matter, even if it's the future you, it still was you, so everything that's happening is because of you. So despite you, I'm going to take away the woman that you love, and then what's going to happen is you're going to inadvertently create the person that's going to go back in time and kill her, just like in some twisted way enjoy it, and it's like, it's very messed up when you think about it like that. Because it also explains the whole Barry, like 20, 50-something Barry being like, oh yeah, don't trust Barry. It's like, they weren't talking about this Barry, they were talking about Savitar Barry. Because I was wondering how this all fit into that, and it's like, that makes more sense as to what this means. Like, the reason why it's like, because I was like, why isn't like future Barry Savitar then? It's like, has he not just crossed over to become Savitar yet? It's like, because this Barry isn't Savitar, this particular time remnant, and so it's a very destructive cycle over and over again to make sure that they still exist. Because basically that's also an interesting thing too, to keep up this legend of keeping Savitar's identities hidden, always been like, oh yeah, I'm the first ever speedster and stuff like that, and just keeping up, perpetuating that lie, creating this legend of trying to be a god when in fact he isn't. The fact of the matter is, when we saw Barry kind of go up against him, it seemed like he wasn't anything without his suit. I mean, to be fair, he can't really use his powers without his suit, because he's gotten so fast that it hurts him, and the only way he can, like, contain the power, we see him use his powers to a small extent when he's running to jump back into the suit, because that's why his face is all messed up. It's because he runs so fast now that it burns his body. The electricity he builds up is too much for his body to handle. And that's what the suit's for, which we end up seeing in this episode. Apparently the suit can act on its own, which that whole thing at the beginning was sick. Like Barry and him start spinning in circles and they dash towards each other and they kind of throw, it's like they charged up lightning and kind of threw it with both hands and it creates like a little explosion. Like parts of the area kind of catch on fire and burn. And it's like pretty badass. But it's so interesting because it brings up an interesting thing for Barry too. It's like, because he realizes like who that guy is. It's not like he's some monster. And that's the thing, like monsters aren't born, they're created. And so for Barry, it's like, I know where he's coming from because when I look at him, I see me. I just see a broken me. You know, probably much like he saw the future version of him being a broken him. It's like, just everything that's happened just kind of broke him. And it's like, he's like, everything he's feeling, I know, because like those feelings are there deep inside, like kind of like screw the consequences. It's like, you know, once you've kind of lost it all, then you stop caring about anything. And it's like, you know, but Barry's like thinking about the fact is that he's always thought sometimes like, who cares about the consequences? Just cross that line, do whatever he kind of wants to. But he always pulls himself back. But he's like, it doesn't matter. Those feelings are still there. Just this version of him is just willing to run free with those feelings. Because the fact of the matter is, he's like, this is what, all those, we know the things that created Savitar, but it's like, what at the end of the day will Barry have to become to beat Savitar? What kind of monster will he have to become, and what kind of things would he have to do, you know? So, I mean, because you know on some level, it's got to mess with Barry's head. The fact is that knowing that, like, the person he's hated all this time for killing Iris is technically him. Even if it's not him, even if it's a time remnant, it's still some version of him that killed Iris. And it's like, but it should, you know, no matter what version of him it is, like, that person should love Iris, but the fact is they're willing to do that, you know? But obviously that's a big part of the story. But the other big part of the story is that basically it's like, okay, Savitar has all this future knowledge. He knows all that Barry knows. Oh, how do we erase that? We make it so that Barry isn't able to create any new memories. So Julian and Cisco work together and try and do that. But they inadvertently make Barry lose his memories of everything. And so everyone's like, oh, wait. He's like, wait, Barry, why you keep calling me? My name's not Barry. It's like Bartholomew. It's like, okay, that's not much better. It's like, Bart sounds a lot better to me. Which started making me think, I was like, the fact of the matter is, why is it that Impulse is called Bart? And then I started thinking, well, maybe it's because since Barry's already going by the name Barry, it's like, it's weird for Bart to go by Barry too, because then you have like 2 Barry Islands and stuff like that. You know, the funny thing is, I've never actually looked it up. I don't know anything about Barry's actual kids. I know about Impulse, his grandson, but I don't know anything about his actual kids. I don't know if he had if he had multiple kids. Did he just have the people, one of them? Because I don't even know like what I think I vaguely remember reading it, but I don't remember if he had a little boy or a little girl. But nevertheless, like whoever grows up to become one of Impulse's parents on Barry's side of the family. So also, it's being a speedster genetic. That hasn't even come up in the show yet. You know, I've constantly brought up Impulse and everything, but I don't know if actually being a speedster is genetic or not. Obviously, Speed Force and everything chooses, you know, sort of. So it's like, I don't know. But obviously, you have Barry trying to readjust to the fact that he doesn't remember things. Asking him and Wally, like he's asking Wally, how do we know each other? Oh yeah, we're brothers. And then Barry's like, having looked at Wally and then kind of looks down at his hand and examining his skin tone, like, wait, what? And then you just have Wally just smiling really big, like, it's complicated. Obviously he doesn't know that he's just a speedster and stuff like that until it accidentally happens when he kisses Iris and his powers kind of activate. But at the same time too, trying to help out with Cecile with the whole case because there's a dude, what was his name? Heatmonder, which Julian made fun of. Was like, that's a stupid name. And then the guy's like right there in front of them in the courthouse, and you have Cisco leaning forward, like, yeah, no, ignore him. Like, it's a really cool name. Trust me, it's a cool name. It's like, why are you going to insult the arsonist dude that's sitting right in front of you, idiot? Fact is, Barry didn't know who Cecile was. It's like, oh, did he lose his memories fighting against some bad guy? And Joe had to be like, nah, we kind of did to him. And Cecile's like, wait, what? He's like, it's not important. But it was kind of a very interesting side effect from this whole like situation of not remembering things. Like, it's something that Iris is actually a little happy about because eventually she saw that Barry didn't remember anything, and all the stuff that kept Barry way down, his mom's murder, his dad's murder, this whole situation with Savitar and her, like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders, and now like without that, like he was happy again. It's like happy in a way, in shape or form she's never seen him in, because he even brought up a conversation like, oh, we're engaged and everything. It's like, oh, so what have we been up to? Have we been, you know, planning a wedding and stuff like that? You know, oh, do we have location, stuff like that? And it's like, you know, you almost see that very sad look on Iris's face, because it's like they haven't been doing any of that, because it's like they want to get married, sure, but they're like, there's that inevitable, well, not inevitable, but the thought of like what could possibly come with Savitar that kind of ruins you wanting to do any planning for it. So, I mean, there hasn't been any word since they were engaged. Like, what are the plans? Like, you know, like, do they plan to like start the wedding soon or stuff like that? So it's kind of heartbreaking when you see that. I mean, obviously she doesn't want to tell him and kind of put that weight back on his shoulder and everything, but it's like she hasn't seen Barry like this in a very long time, because for as long as she could remember, like she ends up bringing up a memory. It's like right after Barry's whole situation back when he was a kid with his mom and dad, Joe brought him back, and she ended up coming downstairs and he was crying. And so for so much of her life, she's known Barry with that weight. And it's like he smiles and everything, but it's still not a hearty smile like he has now. Also, side note, since I said heart, I kind of want to make a note of it. I wanted to make a note of it, and I'm gladly I remembered it. Basically, there's a whole conversation Cisco has with Killer Frost, because obviously Killer Frost is here. I kind of forgot to bring up the point is, like, you know, obviously during an episode we found out that Savitar ends up losing his memory too. Makes sense. They're connected and everything, which in effect obviously has an effect on Wally, because it's like if Savitar doesn't have his memories, doesn't have the whole situation of basically getting Wally his power so that Wally could eventually release him from the Speed Force. But nevertheless, Killer Frost is there because she needs his help. Like, she needs Savitar to be returned, because it's like, I mean, sure, yeah, like, you could just leave things the way they are, because it's like, it kind of solves your Savitar problem, but the fact is, Barry can't be the Flash, like, in this safer form, plus, Wally's in this, doesn't have his powers either, so you're kind of short on speedsters, you know, heroes to save the day in the city and everything, so quite a predicament. But anyway, Cisco's kind of almost teasing Killer Frost a little bit, to the extent I was like, oh, you're trying to tap into that Caitlyn side of her, because it is kind of interesting seeing her as Killer Frost working with them, trying to reverse Barry's memory loss. And he ends up bringing up a particular memory, and he ends up mentioning Hartley, who we have not seen Hartley since season 2. Now, the thing is, this is, to me, it's like a small detail that I appreciate. The fact is, Hartley, basically, he was obviously originally a bad guy. I think the whole situation, I don't remember if he ever escaped, because it was kind of a season 1 thing, I remember. But basically, he re-pops up in season 2. It was after Barry went back in time trying to learn from Eobard, obviously still disguised as Wells, trying to learn how to run faster. It was his first introduction to the time wraiths. And when he came back, Hartley was a good guy and everything, and Caitlyn and Cisco were so cool with him. But now it's like, when you hear Cisco's like, yeah, Hartley. It's like, oh, who's Hartley? He's some bastard like we used to work with. It's like, so that means that's kind of that thing that happened in season 2 is undone because of Flashpoint. And since I'm talking about like that season 2, that's what I initially thought he was talking about. Like, Savitar, I thought Savitar was saying that I mean, I could be well, no, I'm not misinterpreting. Well, to me, I thought that's what he was originally saying, is that the time remnant that burned up against his fight with Zoom, that it was actually, I was thinking that one was the one that was Savitar, but obviously, like I said, I broke down the situation earlier, so, but that was just kind of, you know, like I said, the whole timer thing is very confusing because I don't completely understand it. I have like a very vague notion of trying to, like I said, it's like you go back to yourself like maybe like a second ago in the past and you basically pull yourself into the present moment. Like that's how I explained it back in season 2. That's how I understood it. That's still how I understand it now. Like I said, it's super confusing. I did also appreciate that moment in the courthouse really quickly when Barry was but obviously they're trying, like, Barry has to testify and everything, and so they put these glasses on him, and Julian's kind of typing all this stuff and having Barry read it off, and it's just like, oh yeah, I'm Barry, and I work under the supervision of blah 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 Julian and everything. It's almost like kind of tooting his own smiley face, and it's like lay off the smiley faces and stuff like that. And obviously, things didn't work out because Barry wasn't, himself. But what was kind of interesting to me, I immediately pointed out, it's like, dude, you literally just got, like, the cut trial against you dismissed, and you go straight back to being a criminal. Because apparently they're like, oh yeah, he's like the worst arsonist this town has seen since Mick. heat wave. So kind of a little meatheadish like Mick too, since the fact is he just immediately, like, I mean, it's like, you wouldn't, pick a different time. Like, I mean, it's like you literally just got your case dismissed and you're going back to crime. It's like, you're not even covering your face either, but nevertheless, I guess you do you. But even though it all, like, like I said, Iris wanted to keep him that way, but obviously she needed him back to being Barry because it's the only way, because obviously there's not enough time to teach him everything there is to know, like how to be a speedster and help save people and everything. Because it's something that Joe had brought up to her earlier in the episode. It's like, no matter what happened to Barry in these 28 years he's been alive, the bad stuff, there's also been good stuff that's come along with it too. Because if it wasn't for a lot of, because even, like, in a messed up way, it's like, if it wasn't for the bad things in his life, Barry wouldn't be where he is right now. He wouldn't have the people he has right now. Who knows if there'd ever even be him and Iris right now if it wasn't for some of the bad stuff in his life. Because it's like, if it wasn't for his mom, he never would have went to move in with Joe and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of the whole point of Flashpoint. And that's something Barry points out. The fact is that he understands where Iris is coming from, like the whole, like, oh yeah, wanting things to kind of be, the good, lighthearted, not having all that darkness weigh you down. It's like, he had that, but in Flashpoint. But then again, it's like, he reversed Flashpoint because he didn't have everyone there. Like, they weren't together. They were all working in separate fields. Him, Caitlin, Cisco. Obviously, him and Joe weren't on good terms. Like, obviously, him and Iris, but... No, I take that back. And what I was thinking of, I'm thinking of Earth 2 Barry, where Joe didn't like him. It's like, and this obviously, like, him and Iris didn't even date. So obviously he used his knowledge from this world to kind of start, from the original timeline to kind of start, dating her. And obviously I said it back then and I'll say it now. It's a little kind of cheating to kind of use your knowledge that you know someone so well that they don't know that you know them that well because you mess with time and everything. It's kind of cheating when you actually think about it. Like I said, it's the whole thing. But he didn't really have the life he has here and all the people he has here, so that's why he reversed it. So it's like, once again, like, even with all the bad, there is some good that came along with it. So also in this episode, we had HR and Tracy kind of getting close together and everything. At one point about the kiss and everything, but you have HR kind of pulling back. Eventually they do kiss and everything, which helps her figure out how to, I think they named it the Speed Force Cannon, the weapon they're going to use to trap Savitar. But the problem with that is that it takes like a crap ton of energy. And then at the end of the episode, we see, I think his name's King Shark. We haven't seen him since last season. I mean, granted, he popped up twice last season because I was trying to remember. I was like, has he popped up once per season? It's like, no, last season he popped up twice. The first time was when Earth 2 Wells first popped up. Then obviously, I forgot what the circumstances around the second time. It was kind of a slight crossover because, well, wasn't the last time we saw him, wasn't he being held by Argus again? I mean, once again, I keep forgetting, that was Flashpoint. So, I mean, that was before Flashpoint, so maybe he was never captured. But there's like a giant jewel or something, and then we see him at the end of the episode. So I guess Barry's going up against him next episode. But, also, there was a moment where you see it, like, obviously, I brought up earlier the conversation where it's like Julian and Cisco are working with, bring up memories of, like, Ronnie and stuff like that. And, you see it all kind of affect Caitlin, Killer Frost, but she kind of nudges it away. And then at the end, she's telling everyone, it's like, I never loved you, Julian. I never cared about any of you guys. And she gets in the elevator. And in that moment, you see her eyes flicker back to a normal before they go back to Killer Frost colors. So it's like, obviously, Caitlin is still in there. They still don't know the reason why she's working with Savitar is the reason she wants to get rid of Caitlin. They don't realize that Caitlin is definitely still in there. She's just not able to come to the surface like she would want to. So Julian hasn't given up. I mean, it might be to the point Barry and them might, because Barry's like, yeah, it might be too late. So hopefully they haven't given up on her. So I'm very interested to see where this all goes down, because obviously Savitar pointed out one of his plans is to basically obviously complete the cycle and everything soon enough. But it's like beyond that, like, we don't know his other motives either. And there might be something associated with the Speed Force. But I mean, because I don't even know where to begin to speculate on what. I mean, like, I figure, like, to become a real god might be to try and absorb the Speed Force and make all of its power his own. But like I said, I don't know. That's just a random thought I was having. So overall, very good episode. I mean, it's a situation where it's like, I feel like I brought it up recently in something else, but it's like the whole concept of do your memories make you who you are? And it's like Barry, it doesn't change a lot because of he didn't have his memories. He was still the person that was like, oh, I want to do right. I want to do good things. But the fact of the matter is that's not the person Iris fell in love with. This isn't the guy that everyone else knew. Like, even with all the bad stuff that happened, that was the Barry that they all know, love, and care about. So it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of, it's always a very interesting thing. So, I think I saw something saying, like, I think this was the third to last episode of the season, so I'm under the impression there's only 2 episodes left, obviously with this, Supergirl and Arrow, so, obviously things are going to kick off next episode, so I'm very interested to see what goes down, especially if everything is right, and that is kind of the season finale, coming up the week after next, so, it's going to be interesting to see where everything goes from here. And now moving on to this week's episode of iZombie, a very good episode where we have, in this episode, the case is involving a woman named Yvonne, who's basically a very heavily party girl, very scatterbrained lady, which I love the moment that, like, obviously her roommate Barbara has mentioned all these stuff about her, and it's just like, Clive's like, oh boy, just because and you even have Liv being like, which Liv is kind of okay with it, because it does seem like the brains from last week's episode are still affecting her. And side note, it seems like a small storyline thing, but it's still a continuation of it. I kept having a feeling, I was like, okay, that case seemed like it might have been unresolved. Last week's case, about the whole dominatrix lady situation, it seems like Peyton's kind of getting it too. She's like, yeah, she's looking at the files and everything. She's like, okay, it's kind of weird. He just kind of, there was no evidence or whatever, but he just kind of, confess to it. So it's like, there's definitely a lot more to that. Now, it might be a situation where it's like, cause we still haven't heard from Mr. Balsett also, not unless it's a case that he's associated with, like, I mean, obviously, as we know, like, I forgot her name, but the dominatrix, she was connected to a lot of powerful people. There was obviously the weatherman who was eventually an anchorman and then that lawyer and everything. So there's a lot of prominent people, and the mayor, there's a lot of prominent people connected to her. So maybe Mr. Boss is connected to her, maybe not. Maybe one of Mr. Boss's men was connected to her, maybe not. But it's just like, obviously there's a lot more to that, and I don't know, it don't seem like it was necessarily zombie related, but I mean, for all we know, maybe it was. I mean, obviously she wasn't a zombie, but still, nevertheless. But obviously throughout the episode, you having Liv, like, forgetting to get Robbie's like, okay, give me some, well, really quickly, I want to bring it up. I was about to change subject really good, but it's like, to me, I never thought about that before. It's like, Liv has never been on a brain for a really, really long time. And I'm guessing in this particular situation, like, actually, she's like, yeah, it was fun at first. Like, oh, the dominatrix stuff, it was fun. But it's like, now it's like, like, I got too much of a person inside my head, especially because, like, the visions last a lot longer, too. Because I was thinking, I was like, oh, you're still like that? It's like, oh, no, the reason why you're still like that is because it's the same brain. But, nevertheless, the point I was about to move on to was that, she kept forgetting the fact that Robbie is like, yeah, I need you to get these solutions so we can work on the whole memory recovering thing, because obviously last episode Major took the cure and everything. And then there's that. Then the fact is that she's so very, like I said, scatterbrained, very airheadish. The fact of the matter is, at one point she ends up losing her phone in a guy that she cut open, and Ravi had to do that for her. Just kind of a bit of a mess. I guess it's kind of the best way to put it. Because she's just like, oh my god, like, I'm doing so much. The fact is, oh, couldn't you be like a cutie patootie? And like, obviously she didn't use those exact words, but kind of along the same lines. Oh, couldn't you do this for me? Please, pretty please. You'd be so awesome if you did that for me. Like, oh my god, Clive won't leave me alone. It's like, oh, let me be up here trying to DJ and everything. It's like, oh, you up here during the investigation getting drunk? It's like, no, I mean, yeah, sure, but I'm kind of like, I'm wearing this guy down even though he walked away and everything. Side note, I appreciate that dude Sage. That's the actor who played Zane from Eureka. I was like, Zane! Side note, if you've never watched Eureka, I literally bring that up all the time. If you've never watched Eureka, like, change that. It's a very funny, awesome show, but it's like, Zane! But, nevertheless, it's actually kind of interesting because it's like, CW connection, because Erica, Sarah, Becca, as well as, Allie from the 100, their characters dated in the show Eureka. But nevertheless, the main part of the case, obviously, like, the kind of, finish up with it, like, what's the fact is that what we end up finding out that her roommate Barbara actually killed her. Because basically, once again, like, you know, Yvonne was like very terrible at keeping up with things. So like she was super far behind in rent. She's like $1,000 behind in rent. Basically, Barbara had like a very kept baseball that obviously like signed by someone famous or whatever. Like, I don't know baseball, but basically Yvonne sold that and then proceeded to kind of put a fake replacement in its place, and Barbara got super pissed and killed her, just, you know, flood of emotions and stuff like that. So there was that part of the case, but the main part of the episode is focused on the fact is, hey, Major, like, you're not forgetting anything, are you? It's like, nope, I'm remembering everything. And it's like, oh man, food tastes good and everything, which is, it's kind of interesting because obviously Major throughout the episode is losing his memories, and it's like, it's kind of interesting. It fits with the whole narrative of, you know, Liv, like, you know, being scatterbrained at the time, like not remembering a lot of stuff. So it's like, it fits the narrative too. But nevertheless, at first, like, you know, Major's kind of enjoying it, everything, but it's like a little stuff here and there. Obviously Liv was like, you know, the first thing that came out of her mouth, it's like, oh my God, he hasn't forgot me. It's like, me, you know, Major, it's me, Liv. And he's like, yeah, I know, you're, you know, oh yeah, we're dated, you know, you became a zombie, then I became a zombie, and now I'm cured and everything. She's like, oh goodness. It's almost like, phew, as long as he remembers me, who cares about anything else? There's even a sweet moment where later on in the episode where he's literally writing notes to everyone. Even Liv points out, like, at once, she's like, is this a tear stain on the one about Robbie? He's like, don't judge me, I just got a little emotional and everything, you know? And then she starts getting a little insecure and everything. She's like, oh no, the fact is, it's such a light envelope for me. It's like, do you not like me? Do you hate me or something like that? He's like, no, it's just going to tell you that, you know, to kind of remind me that I do love you and everything. So to kind of remind him to, like, a note to be like, hey, remind me of, like, you know, what we have and everything. Have/had. But there was a point in the episode, obviously, when Major's like starting to really, really, really lose his memories, and he ends up taking a bus ride to a place called Walla Walla, and it's like, he ends up running into his mom, and who I assume is his sister. It's been a very long time, so I don't remember if you ever, like, the way it seems like it's like he hasn't really talked to his mom in a very long time, because obviously she's like, oh yeah, last time I heard you were engaged to some woman, and it was like, oh yeah, Liv. So obviously she's not in his life, because I think his parents obviously the way the conversation talks, it's like his parents got split up. I don't remember if he ever saw his dad or his dad's girlfriend, like, at the beginning of the series. Like, I don't think his family's ever really come up, has it? Maybe it has. There was a lady named Dahlia. I assume that might be his sister. No, because I feel like the conversation never came up. So obviously not his sister. At least I don't think. But it's like, I don't know. Like, I feel like Major's family life never really came up before. Maybe it has. Like I said, it's been a while, so maybe I'm just not remembering it. I'm not remembering it. But it turns out, because obviously, like, at first, like, Ravi kind of gets, you know, a call from Donnie, because Donnie wants to talk about a dude that wants to get the cure. It's like, oh yeah, he's got a crap ton of money. Obviously, when he brings it up to Ravi, he reduces the amount of money the dude has, like, tremendously. It's like, oh yeah, we can 50-50 split that 100,000. I swear I'm pretty sure he said he had like $1 million. It's like, oh, Donnie still being the son of a gun that he is. But, nevertheless, isn't that the same dude he met last episode? Who I completely forgot to talk about last week. I was like, I don't know. I guess because it was such a small thing, I was like, oh, maybe it doesn't really mean anything, because it doesn't seem like it's necessarily advancing the whole, like, business that him and Blaine's dad are running. But nevertheless, isn't that the same dude that he was kind of getting drugs from, and then, like, oh, they're partying it up last episode? I think it's the same dude. Might not be. But nevertheless, he's like, yo, I need the cure. Like, I thought being a zombie would be fun, but it's like, nah, it's crap. I just want to be back to being human. And it's like, oh yeah, take the cure and everything. And then Robbie kind of brings up, plus, you know, the cure doesn't work. It's the whole fake memory thing. And then Donnie's like, you know, he's been faking his entire time. I'm like, Donnie's still on this and everything. He's pointing out something. I'm like, you know, it's like, yeah, like, he basically makes a reference to, like, oh yeah, like, there's a guy named John that Blaine made a reference to after losing his memories, but it's like, that's a dude that he knew, like, prior to him losing his memories and stuff like that, which Robbie kind of pushes away. It's like, yeah, I know plenty of Johns, and just kind of like, okay, just go away. Then he kind of brings it up to Peyton later on, because, like, to Donnie, he's like, oh, this is a perfect opportunity, escape Mr. Balls, all the bad stuff, you know, not kind of be caught up in all the bad stuff he was associated with, plus he gets Peyton at the end of it. Robbie didn't want to mention it originally. Obviously, you know, I would think things between him and Peyton are super awkward still. Especially because Peyton was kind of like, her and Blaine were kind of hitting it off to the point Liv was kind of like, okay, let's kind of cut it back a little bit, you know, when there's guests around, you know, you and Blaine doing your thing, kind of being all cute and adorable and kissing and stuff like that. He brings it up to her, but obviously Peyton kind of shuts him down. It's like, yeah, maybe you shouldn't have brought it up. But obviously, like, he brings it up because obviously he cares about Peyton, but also because, like, if it is true about the cure, that means that obviously Liv can be cured as well as everyone else. But like, obviously, like, she didn't want to listen to it, but she did take it too hard a little bit. So she went back and talked to Blaine about it, and then it's revealed that Blaine is in fact faking. I was like, wow, you really were? Well, not the entire time, because apparently with the cure, it does work, but the fact of the matter is, you slowly forget everything, and then all at once, it's all blank, but then after a little, like a couple of days, it will automatically come back after a while. So, he has been faking it most of the time. Like, probably like 95% of the time, he's been faking it. And it's like, dude, which Peyton got super pissed about, because Blaine was like, because he was thinking like, because she was kind of leading him on, because she knew she probably had an inkling, so she wanted to test the theory. She wanted to test the theory herself, and so she's like, yeah, even if you were faking your memories, it's like, this is the you that I've come to fall in love with. This is the real you, and it's like, even if you were faking having memory loss and everything, I'd still be okay with it. He's like, you wouldn't be pissed? She's like, why would I be? And it's like, oh yeah, I lied. I'm a lawyer, so I am super pissed because my friend could have been cured months ago, her and Major, because Major pushed off the cure for so long because he thought of those ramifications. That's why Ravi's third cure didn't work with the whole memory situation, because it's like, how are you supposed to remember something that you already remember? And it's like, dude, I was so sure. I was like, man, Donnie's got it wrong, his dad's got it wrong. But I was like, no, Donnie had it right. Even being who he is, kind of like, obviously, you kind of think Donnie's an idiot, but it's like, no, he called it. He called it from the very beginning that Blaine was playing, and he played his part well, pretending not to have. I mean, granted, he wanted a new opportunity. He wanted to start things over and everything, but plus with things with Peyton. I mean, to be fair, that means that whole like situation. I mean, now that you actually think about it, it's like, that's why that whole situation with Mr. Boss played out the way it did. I didn't think twice about that till just now. I was like, he lost his memories and everything, yet he handled himself pretty well with a gun and everything. It's like, because he remembered everything. It's like, the signs were there. I just wasn't willing to see it. I was like, dude, you faked it. I mean, granted, who's to say for sure that wasn't 100% of the time? I feel like that's definitely had to be around the time he was faking it, but maybe it wasn't. But, so, I mean, obviously things are kind of ending between Peyton and him now, which kind of sucks for Blaine, because it's like, oh, she was his reason to kind of be good. I mean, obviously he wants a new life and everything, but I mean, they were saying like, oh, this gave him an opportunity to kind of keep the business up, but has he ever really kept the business up? I mean, to our knowledge, I mean, he has taken some phone calls away from them, but it's like, I don't know if he's actually kept the business up. Maybe he has, but it seemed like the main focus was Peyton. I'd like to think it was, that he really wasn't BSing around. It wasn't like he was actually doing business stuff, that he was So then it's like, if that's the case, what does this mean about the whole deal he made with his dad? Like, was that a calculated move to kind of keep up the image of like, oh, I've lost my memories and everything? Maybe. But, this is, I mean, obviously it's bad, it's kind of sad news there, but at the same time, it presents good news opportunities, kind of, sort of, because this means maybe Ravi and Peyton can kind of, I mean, granted, there's still the whole awkward thing where he's like, slept with his former boss and everything, especially after confessing his feelings to Peyton. Obviously, like, things are still a little rocky there, but it's slowly mending bridges, because, like, now for Peyton, like, I'm sure Peyton feels even worse now, because, like, she made that mistake once, and then she thought Blaine was a good guy, and so, it's like, oh, you're not that same person anymore, so she wanted to make an effort and make it work again this time, because, like, oh, you're not the guy, you're the guy I thought you were, and not the guy that you actually were back, so it's like, hey, and then now it's like, oh, you've actually been the same guy the entire time. It's like, even if you've had like this whole mentality change, and even if you've been a good guy, the fact of the matter is you lied to me. You made it so that my friends couldn't get cured. It's like, if you wanted a new chance, all you had to do was be like, oh, admit the truth. But then again, if he admitted the truth that he was who he was, then obviously that would have led to like Peyton not wanting to be with him. Because once again, like, she only wanted to be with him because at this point in time, she thought he was the guy that she thought he was. Super confusing with the way that I said that. I'm sorry for my terrible phrasing. I do that a lot with these. So it's like, oh, it's a good, joyous moment and everything. So it's like, hey, let Liv take the cure. Oh, crap. The cures have been stolen. It's like, oh, so there's a number of people who could have stolen it. Blaine, which I don't think it is Blaine, because at the end of the episode we do see, because obviously like there was the print off of all the ingredients needed to make the cure. We see Blaine kind of mixing it at the end of the episode. Only assume that he's basically making a cure so that he can obviously sell it off to other people who might want to, you know, be human again for whatever reason. You know, now it kind of gives him a competition against his dad's business. Like, oh yeah, you know, you make them zombies, they get bored, they come to me, and I supply them with human, you know, the human cure. I mean, maybe that's the way you play it, maybe not. I mean, either way, like, obviously he's going to make a profit off of this situation. So obviously, kind of leaning towards the fact that he might not have done it. Still, he could have done it just to get rid of any other possible cures being out there, like giving it to zombies away for free. It's like, no, if any cures are going to be dished out, it's going to be by me, and I'm going to make a profit off of it. 2, it could have been Donnie. I don't think it was Donnie. Like I said, could be wrong. We'll really have to wait and see whether the person he knows is unzombified or not. But to me, the person I'm leaning more towards is actually Fillmore Graves. Let's not forget that Major's friend knows about the whole cure situation, and he could have easily gone back and mentioned it to someone else, who mentioned it to someone else, who eventually mentioned it to Vivian. Or maybe it's a situation where it's like, no, like he went straight to her. Like I brought that up before, like there being a quote unquote cure. Not a lot of zombies are going to appreciate the fact that a cure exists. So like they might be trying to remove it from the playing field or something. I don't know. There's always a possibility too that someone else took it. Once again, the Robbie's former boss, played by Christina Cox, like, right, Caddy, is what she was saying, like they could call her. Maybe she stumbled across it trying to examine him because she's like, oh, I know Ravi and the others are hiding something, so let me figure that out. Or, I don't know. Like I said, my mind is more so leaning towards Fillmore Grace, but I could be 100% wrong. We will just have to wait about that. There is the one cure that Major never used, but it's like he never told them because obviously he made Ravi a promise that he wouldn't look into that whole, God, I'm blanking on her name and it pisses me off so much. Natalie, that's it. Literally the entire episode, I couldn't think, like when it came down to it, I've been waiting before I even started recording, couldn't remember her name. Just clicked in my brain. Because literally it took me to go, my brain went, Natasha. I was like, no, Natasha's not right. Natalie. Knew it had to be an N name. But nevertheless, Natalie has the other cure. Because obviously, like, the guy that she's with and everything, like, Blaine promised Ravi he wouldn't get involved any further, but he did, so obviously he hasn't really said anything about it, but he gave her the cure. Now, whether she's taken it or not, I don't know. Because that could be another possibility, too. Maybe the guy that, you know, has her now found out about the cure and everything, or maybe she traded the cure for her freedom or something like that. And it's like, oh, yeah, like, Ravi, you know, Major told me about it, and it's like this guy Ravi, you know, I mean, I don't think Major really went into that many details about it, so I'm sure that's not the case. But what it does come down to is, like, you know, Natalie has the other cure. Now, whether she's used it or not, like I said, like before, we don't know. So that'll probably be dealing with the next episode because, like, Ravi doesn't have the materials needed to make another cure right now. Because that was kind of the whole problem, like, trying to get Utopium for, like, the cure and everything. So, like, the original batch needed that caused the whole zombie outbreak in the first place, at least here in Seattle. So, like I said, but once again, I'll reiterate, still thinking Fillmore Grace, but like I said, could be 100% wrong. So, we'll just have to see, because, like, knowing that Fillmore Grace, that didn't come up. He's like, oh yeah, I got other things to do. Like, I guess it was connected to the memory stuff, but it's like, I thought he was going to go into Fillmore Grace. I was like, hey guys, like, whoa, what's up with you? It's like, yeah, I'm human again. Wait, what? How did, you know, I thought that whole conversation come up. Didn't come up this episode, so I don't know. Maybe it'll come up next episode, but or not. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. So, like I said, overall, a very, very good episode with some very interesting developments. So, looks like, you know, Liv isn't 100% done with this zombie life just quite yet. So, and now moving on to this week's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. A very good episode. Obviously, everyone trying to deal with the respective situations like, oh, waking up from the framework. Obviously, you have Coulson and May. Things being a little awkward between them. May keeps bringing up the whole robot situation. It's like, oh, how long did it take you to figure it out? Oh, it took you that long, huh? It's like, what made you kind of finally figure it out? It's like, oh, yeah, this, and that, and obviously. And then she's like, okay, what's going on, Coulson? Because she brings up the fact is, well, if I end up passing out, you can always give me mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. He's just kind of like, And she's like, okay, what now? He's like, okay, the robot tried to, she's like, well, she's like, did the robot try to make a move on you or something? It's like, did the robot try to kill you? He's like, yep, that's it. Robot tried to kill me. It's like, well, yeah, we'll kind of get past it. Coulson is kind of like, Which he kind of admits later on. He's like, yeah, I opened that bottle of wine. Like, that bottle that we were supposed to be sharing, I kind of opened it with the robot. I mean, he doesn't specify the robot, but I'm sure she filled in the blanks. Because for him, it's like, it's awkward for Coulson, because I'm sure it's like, obviously the feelings kind of develop between him and the LMD May, but the fact of the matter is, like, just because that's how that happened with this fake May, she might have been programmed to, you know, she was more inclined to lean more towards that, like, creating romantic feelings between her and Coulson, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the real May feels the same way, so that's why he's a little reluctant to kind of bring that up, because it's like, well, what, maybe May doesn't feel the same way about him, which, obviously, like, it's built upon her own specifications, like how May feels, and whether May's willing to admit how she feels or not. Maybe like fake, you know, LMD May was kind of like there was some truth to how she felt that it represents how the real May feels. Interestingly enough, we also finally pinpoint exactly when she got taken, because it's like, okay, so the last thing I remember is like we were dealing with the whole Eli situation. It's like, oh yeah, and basically explains how the whole Eli situation ended. It's like, oh, so okay, that's cool and interesting. We gotta look at the whole Anton situation. We find out that there's more than one Anton, which I also like the fact is that when, obviously it's like, oh yeah, you don't have the shield to hide behind, and then he activates the shield on his arm and it slices Anton's face off. It's like, yeah, it does a lot more than that. So that was kind of cool. But Anton seems to be, obviously we know that Ada put his head on a robot body, but it turns out that basically his head, like in that time, he's created other robot versions of himself, or maybe Ada already did it before, but nevertheless, that one human head controls all the cybernetic bodies, which, granted, you don't know which one's the real head or not, so. And then finally, there's also the Ophelia, Ada situation with Fitz. Obviously, the fact is that, she's like, oh, enjoying her humanity and stuff like that. I mean, she admits that everything she's done has been for Fitz's sake, because they're trying to do everything for the sake of becoming human so that she can be with the person that she's in love with. She always cared about Fitz before, but she could never probably, like, put it to words or to a feeling. Like, she could probably look through her dictionary, like, you know, in her head and be like, oh, obviously I love him because this is what love, you know, I'm very attached to this human, so that must mean that's what love is about and everything. So, but now she can actually feel it and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like Fitz isn't feeling the whole situation, because obviously he's dealing with because the whole situation is like, for them, it's like they remember, and it's something that Coulson and May testify to as well. As the fact is that to them, like, the framework stuff is still there. They remember their lives in the framework. It isn't just like a dream or whatever. It felt just as real as being back in the real world feels to them. So for Fitz, he's caught in between, because he's like, the fact is I hurt a lot of people and everything. And it's like, for Ada, she's like, oh, they were nothing but, you know, programs and stuff like that. It's like, well, that's not true about Mace. And that's not true about Agnes. I mean, technically Agnes, yeah, but that was like all that was left of her and everything. And so, you know, to him, it's like, the fact of the matter is, he's like, you did this all, and she's like, I didn't do anything. Fitz, everything you did was on your own. All I did was add your father to the programming, and which, in itself, that makes Fitz, like, start doubting himself, because it's like, wait a minute, so that means everything that happened was already within me. All that was in me. All it took was her bringing my father into the equation, and it brought out that side of me. I could have easily been like that. And he even starts comparing himself to Ward. He's like, I could have been Ward, like, with a whole messed up family situation. And so it's like, his messed up family situation led to him becoming who he is. And it's like, Fitz is kind of saying, like, I'm basically did the same thing. Like, it's like, all those actions weren't on Ida, they were on me, because that's how I really am on the inside. I'm not really a good person. But obviously he's trying to talk to her to help her be like, no, like, obviously she's feeling things. Like, obviously she's scared at one point, because it's like, I don't want to go back to help your friends because I might die. And that's something I don't want to do. But for Fitz, it's like, come on, you have to put, like, obviously you feel empathy. You feel, you know, you don't want to die, obviously, but neither do my friends. So it's like, please go back and help them and stuff like that. She tries to talk to Anton. Anton's not, you know, it's like, oh yeah, the fact of the matter is, he's like, it's kind of ironic, because it's like, basically, you wanted to kind of get rid of everyone's regret, but now that you become human, you've submitted to the same thing that you're trying to eliminate from people in the first place, that being regret, because now she's regretting the fact that she gave Anton permission to kill everyone. So now, Because the thing is, like, it's something that Fitz brings. It's like, oh yeah, you're doing the right thing. It's like, is she doing the right thing for the right reasons, or is she doing it because she knows she'll get your approval? Because that's what this all comes down to. She wants Fitz, and she doesn't care about anything else. But obviously, it turns into kind of a love triangle situation to a certain extent, because Gemma, it's obviously like she's gonna have a problem dealing with the whole like what Fitz did thing. But what matters most is the fact is that, because of said thing about the memories being real, feeling real, obviously Fitz in the framework loved Ophelia, and it's like, what if that changes his feelings for Gemma? And it's like, that's what kind of upsets her. So obviously Fitz and Ophelia are locked up together, and it's like, she's talking to him and everything. It's like, she's like, oh, I understand you. And he's like, yeah, you do understand me. It's like, yeah, there's no room into my heart for two people, so I'm gonna have to choose her. And they're like, yeah. And she's like, wait, what? He's like, what do you mean? She's like, her. And he's like, yeah. It's like, yeah, you were there for me in the framework and everything, but Gemma, you were my everything in the framework, but Gemma's here. And she's like, she gets super pissed. This is like jealousy and rage, and just because, like, obviously, like, she's still new to the whole human experience, but her emotions run high because it's like, this is her first time, and the way Anton puts it, heartbreak / rejection, because Fitz didn't choose her. She literally did so much. She did everything. She's like, I called my way here to become human so I could be with you, and you don't want to be with me? It's like, wow, she went from like 0 to 100 real quick. That was crazy. It's like, she went from like, oh, comforting, caring person to kind of psycho obsessed girlfriend, like just like that. That was crazy. I mean, that's the problem with emotions and stuff like that. It's like, emotions are fine and dandy, but the fact of the matter is, if you're not used to them, like, normally emotions are hard for even humans to handle. But for her, it's like, even like for a normal person, it's like, oh yeah, like, when you're a kid and everything, you have a hard time controlling your emotions. For her, she's in that exact same state. She's only been human for like, what? Not even a day? And that's already happened? So, because I also was curious about this too, because obviously we saw that she has Gordon's ability to kind of teleport. It also appears that she has, from the look of it, it looked like it was Lincoln's lightning abilities. Electricity abilities, probably more appropriate description. But so how much other stuff does she have up her arsenal? We do see at one point, like, obviously she takes a whole bunch of bullets, doesn't die, because the way Fitz is like, we cannot stop her. She is unstoppable. And he ends up talking to May. It's like, basically, like, the cat of whatever, all Inhumans, like, I'm sure all her data was pulled from all known sources of Inhuman information, because within the framework, every Inhuman that, was ever added to the system, where Fitz kind of experimented on and stuff, what their powers were kind of added to the system, and they were also added to the Looking Glass machine and everything. So how many abilities she has, we don't know. It's not like, cause before I was like, oh, did she kind of like on the Eli level, which she kind of is, but to a certain extent, like, she's not like, I mean, not unless it's a combination of the two. Like, she has that power, but like that power of like being able to do anything, it's manifested in the form of Inhuman abilities, rather than making it a power to like, oh, I can create anything out of anywhere. It's like, no, like, there's a basis for them, because it's like, we took the data of the Inhuman abilities and now they've kind of been brought to life with her body. So far we've seen 2, so there's no telling how many, but the way Fitz is talking about it, it's like probably every Inhuman that's ever been categorized within the confines of the series exists within her now. So, and she proceeds to get out and starts killing people, snapping necks and such. I mean, like I said, it was sad and everything, because to me, I was looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, this is actually an opportunity, because obviously she saved Fitz, she saved Mac and everything, so it's like, okay, it's good. The fact of the matter is, obviously she can be reasoned with, obviously, maybe it's like, obviously they're going to have a hard time working with her, but eventually they can make her into a good, oh, nope, no possibility of you being a good guy, because you're a full-blown bad guy now, because you're like, screw the world, my heart is broken. Basically, Anton put her in a position to kill one of his fakes, so that basically she gets the feeling of what it's like to kill now, so she's armed with that, and because this is her first time being able to outright kill someone of her own free will. She finally has free will and everything, and it means nothing because she can't get the one thing that she wants. What she made it clear to Fitz, it's like, you're gonna be with me whether you want to or not. Even though she's pissed like she is now, I'm sure that's still the case. Basically, we're going back to Anton's plan of wiping out Inhumans, so they're going back to being in-hunted. Like, basically, it's like, for him, it's like, oh, we can make that framework world real, where it's like Hydra's kind of in control and humans are on the run, which is more what Anton wants. I mean, that kind of along with the whole S.H.I.E.L.D. situation, more so than anything, Coulson, he still has his problem with Coulson about what happened, which is what, that's its own thing, which I'm still kind of fuzzy on. Like, obviously he blames Coulson for all the people that were in his unit that ended up dying, but it's like, that's kind of like your government's choice to kind of do that because they failed or whatever, but it's like they wouldn't have failed if it wasn't for Coulson getting whatever they needed to get out of that episode. Because that was the episode we learned a little bit more about Coulson and Maze passing them kind of interact themselves when they were less experienced, I guess would be the more appropriate word. And also it seems like the whole aspect is to kind of like, once again, kind of mirroring the framework is that basically humans are going to be under her control, which is kind of what she kind of wants. Like I said, like she wants Fitz by any other means, so she's going to get the world to kind of kneel down to her. An interesting development we did see at the end of the episode is we have Robbie returning. Freaking, I did not see that coming. I was like, obviously Talbot and them left. Obviously he had that whole conversation with Coulson because it's like, oh, I don't know if you're robots or not. Even brought up the whole conversation about Mace, which apparently like that was that her or was that Anton? I think Anton brought up the fact that it was him who actually did it. Or maybe it was, I think she ended up getting him or someone else. Or she did it herself, but basically like hammered up Mace's body. So it's like, that sucks. Like, it's like, because to them, I think they're looking at it like, it's like, oh yeah, like his body was hit by a quake. I'm thinking like, because obviously, like, they find the base the way it is. They find some of the S.H.I.E.L.D. agents dead and stuff like that, which is sad that those two S.H.I.E.L.D. agents died because it's like, they've been on that, obviously in the jet with, everyone, like, dealing with this whole, like, situation. Is obviously they had that funny conversation. It's like, yo, if someone complains about my driving one more time, I'm just gonna let go and everything. It's like, oh, this funny conversation, and now they're both dead. It's like, wow. It's like, oh yeah, oh, you're funny guys, and now you're gone. It's like, oh yeah, you were always meant to be. That's always when it comes to stuff like this, you always feel bad for like the extra characters, because just like you're not main character status, so you're likely to kind of be wiped out. I mean, like this show shows even people who have the potential to be main character status or at least recurring character status are wiped out. So certain unless you're in that main character status. I mean, to be fair though, that doesn't protect you necessarily either, because let's not forget what happened to Ward. Where's Ward right now? He's dead. Lincoln kind of fell in that category. Where is he? He's dead. So it's not like that strange an idea. Radcliffe kind of fell in that category. Where is he? He's dead, technically. But nevertheless, we saw Robbie coming back, for whatever situation he was dealing with. We do have Ghost Rider back, which is like probably the best weapon to have on your team against someone as powerful as her. She has all these inhuman abilities and like going up against kind of the devil himself. So this is definitely going to be interesting. I wasn't expecting that. That was a very, very cool and good surprise. I was not expecting us to see him like any more this season, but kudos that we do. Also, like, I'm very curious to see where Gemma and Fitz go from here. Obviously, Gemma heard what Fitz said and everything. It's like, which is good, but at the same time, it doesn't change the fact is that I think she can move past the whole, like, part of his brain that was like, oh, that, like, maybe on some shape or form he loved her at one point in time, but obviously he chose Gemma. But at the same time, it doesn't change what he did, Like, the thing is, because also Fitz might not be able to forgive himself for being responsible for Agnes's death, for Mace's death and everything. Like, all that's going to weigh on him and everything. And still there's that, still hasn't come back up yet. I'm sure that's going to be like a very end of the next episode type of thing, but the senator's brother, like her brother ended up going back into Cocoon state, like going back into Terrigenesis state, like at the bottom of the water after being shot. So like, obviously there's a lot more to that. Maybe he'll play a role in the next episode too. Like, we don't know what that's all about. Not unless that's setting up some like mega level, like super bad guy level stuff. Like, it's like, oh, you thought Hive was bad? Maybe this is going to be something even worse. We're just kind of have to wait and see, but, hope things kind of work out with Gemma and Fitz. It's like they went through so much to get to where they were. They were a happy relationship, and then like all that fell apart. So I hope they're able to find their way back to each other. Coulson and May kind of lead to whatever that's going to be. You're hoping for the best, but I mean, I don't know. I think that really comes down to Coulson, whether he's really willing to. Like, he already put himself out there once before. I mean, to be fair though, it was with the android. That's what I was halfway expecting at the end of the episode. It's like, oh yeah, like Talbot, like, oh, some of our men are dying. It's like, what is that about? Maybe the place is poisonous or something just killing us. Oh, let's get out of here. I was thinking like, oh man, what we're going to see is the fact is that some of those LMDs are actually still alive. They just happen to activate as time and they were killing off some. It's like, no, something else was doing that, but damn it, obviously we got revealed that Ghost Rider. But nevertheless. We also have to deal with the whole Max situation, Max's unwillingness to leave, and also Yo-Yo injecting herself inside of the framework, which obviously Daisy warned against because it's like that's the last place you want to be, especially at the end of the episode because we see when she wakes up inside the framework, she's strapped to a table, of buildings on fire. Because you got to remember, Fitz is gone, so is Madam Hydra, so Hydra isn't in control anymore, and I'm sure, you know, you have like S.H.I.E.L.D fighting back and everything, but still, like, she's probably in the belly of the lion, and, you know, I mean, granted, she's probably not even an Inhuman in that world either, too. I mean, Daisy wasn't, but, I mean, that was crafted, that was a narrative that was crafted specifically because, you know, it's like, oh, that's how Daisy would be in that world. She'd be, you know, Sky, she wouldn't know anything about her Inhuman, connections and stuff like that. So maybe we'll kind of get a second chance to look at a lot of, you know, because I was wondering about the whole framework situation. I mean, I'll get right into it. Like, I did not realize that next week's episode is literally the season finale. I think it's because of the whole Flash situation. Is kind of like, because, you know, this and the Flash are kind of taking breaks and stuff like that, so their numbers might be a little off. But it's like, I don't know. Maybe the numbers are right. I feel like this season was shorter, but most likely it's probably like because all these breaks and stuff, the number of episodes is a little off in my head. So, but nevertheless, it seems like next week is the season finale. Like I said, it seems weird. I mean, I'm excited, but at the same time, I'm like, man, over already? I was expecting many more episodes. So I'll probably look it up afterwards to find out. But it probably is like, oh yeah, it's the exact same number of episodes. I'm not actually sure how many episodes each season has. I thought like 23 or 24, but I think the 23 thing is just because of the superhero shows I'm used to. It might be 24. I mean, hell, this might be like episode 24, but I think now I'm sitting here thinking maybe it's also 22. Maybe it's just, like I said, maybe the season's shorter. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm very interested to see, like, you know, what developments are going to happen within the framework. Will she be able to convince Matt to come back? Because if there's anyone that's going to be able to do it, it has to be her. Because she's the closest person because, I mean, amongst everyone, like, Yo-Yo is the only person that knows that truth about Mac, you know, about his daughter Hope. So, and also there's this whole situation, like, it makes you wonder, does that mean, like, the framework is going to come, like, break down next episode? Like, try to get Mac out as soon as possible before the framework breaks down? Or maybe it's a situation where it's like, maybe they can use the machine to bring Hope into the real world, kind of like they did, Ida, maybe. I mean, you never know. That might be what they do. I mean, that in itself, depending on what they do with the machine, that could easily turn into a situation all on its own. So, I'm very curious to see what they decide to do with the Darkhold. Maybe it is continuing Eli's plan, like using that as a means of eventually, well, the machine kind of represents Eli's plans, but maybe all that's connected to trying to wipe out all the humans. I don't know how exactly that's going to do that, but I'm very interested to find out. Like I said, season finale, no telling how this craziness is all going to end. So, but I'm very excited to see how it does. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.